My name is Morgan Hayes, and for 28 years, my family treated me like their greatest disappointment. Now they're lining up with their hands out, desperate for a piece of what they once mocked. Funny how a few $1,000,000 can suddenly make you worth their time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm sitting in my corner office, 40 floors above San Francisco, staring at an email from my brother Ethan. The subject line reads, "Family Investment Opportunity." I almost laugh at the irony. 5 years ago, he wouldn't even take my calls. The glass walls of my office showcase the tech empire I've built from nothing. Horizon Analytics, valued at $12 million and growing. My employees hustle between meetings, their energy fueling the company that changed everything for me. The company my family said would never succeed. My assistant, Raj, knocks gently on the door. "Your 2 o'clock is here," he says, placing a fresh coffee on my desk. "Thanks. Give me 5 minutes?" I ask, my finger hovering over the delete button on Ethan's email. As Raj leaves, I swivel my chair to face the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawls below, a testament to possibility. I never imagined I'd be here, not after what I'd been through. Growing up in small-town Idaho, I was the odd one out in the Hayes family. My parents, Richard and Donna, had 3 children. My brothers, Ethan and Noah, were the golden boys. Athletic, traditionally successful, and following the perfectly planned trajectories my parents had mapped out. Ethan became the high school quarterback with a full ride to Washington State. Noah was the academic prodigy, acing every test and becoming class valedictorian before heading to medical school. And then there was me, the dreamer, the girl, with her head in the clouds, the one who couldn't seem to fit the mold no matter how hard I tried. The Hayes boys and their sister, people would say, as if I were merely an afterthought. At dinner tables, my parents would beam with pride as they shared Ethan's latest touchdown stats or Noah's perfect exam scores. When the conversation turned, to me their smiles would tighten. "Vanessa is still figuring things out," my mother would say, while my father would clear his throat and change the subject. It wasn't that I wasn't smart or capable, I was simply interested in different things. While my brothers excelled in traditional paths, I was fascinated by data patterns, emerging technologies, and business models that nobody in my small town understood. My room was filled with business journals, coding books, and notebooks crammed with ideas that my family dismissed as fantasies. "When are you going to focus on something realistic?" my father would ask, his disappointment palpable. The nickname started when I was 16. I had used my savings to build a prototype data visualization tool for local businesses, only to have it crash during a presentation to the town's Chamber of Commerce. "Another failure for the record books," Ethan had joked at dinner that night. The name stuck. I became the failure, first as a seemingly harmless family joke, then as a persistent shadow that followed me through high school and beyond. My senior year, when I announced I wanted to study computer science and business instead of pursuing the teaching career my parents had assumed I'd choose, my father's face fell. "Don't set yourself up for another disappointment, Vanessa," he said, his voice heavy with what he thought was concern. "Teaching is stable. You could be good at it if you applied yourself." Despite their doubts, I enrolled at a state college, working 2 jobs to pay my way after my parents decided to invest their savings in Noah's medical school tuition instead. "He'll actually finish," my mother had explained, not meeting my eyes. College should have been my escape, but the Wright family nickname followed me through monthly phone calls and holiday visits. "How's our little failure doing?" Noah would ask when he called, his voice laced with what he thought was brotherly teasing, but cut deeper than he knew. During my junior year, I developed an algorithm that could predict consumer behavior with remarkable accuracy. My professor encouraged me to present it at a tech conference in Chicago, but I needed $500 for travel expenses. I swallowed my pride and called home. "Another one of your schemes?" My father had sighed. Vanessa, when are you going to get serious about your future? I still remember sitting on the floor of my dorm room, clutching the phone as my eyes burned with unshed tears. This is my future, Dad. This could be big. Your brother is saving lives in his residency program, and Ethan just got promoted at his firm. Those are real achievements, not some computer game. I never made it to the conference. Instead, I watched online as a similar algorithm won first prize, landing its creator a job at a major tech company. After graduating summa cum laude, an achievement that earned merely a nod from my parents while they threw a lavish party for Noah's completion of residency, I moved to San Francisco with nothing but 2 suitcases and an unshakable determination. The city was booming with tech opportunities, and I was desperate to prove that I wasn't the failure my family believed me to be. My first apartment was a converted storage room in a run-down building, shared with 3 roommates I found on Craigslist. I took a low-paying job at a struggling startup, working 18-hour days as a junior data analyst. At night, I continued developing my consumer prediction algorithm, refining it until it was better than anything on the market. Every Sunday, I'd call home, hoping for some encouragement. Instead, I'd hear about Ethan's new house or Noah's prestigious fellowship. When I tried to share my own progress, the conversation would quickly shift. "That's nice, dear," my mother would say, her voice distracted. "Did we tell you Ethan is getting married? His fiancée comes from such a good family." On one particularly difficult Sunday, after learning my algorithm had been rejected by yet another venture capital firm, I called home in tears. "Maybe this is a sign," my father said, his voice gentle but condescending. "You've given it a good shot, Vanessa. No one can say you didn't try. There's still time to get your teaching certificate." I hung up and stared at my computer screen, at the code I'd poured my heart into. For a moment, just a moment, I wondered if they were right. Maybe I was setting myself up for a lifetime of disappointment. Maybe I was exactly what they called me, a failure. That night, I walked to the pier and watched the lights of the city reflecting on the bay. San Francisco was alive with innovation and possibility. People came here to reinvent themselves, to build things that changed the world. Why not me? I took a deep breath of the salt-tinged air and made a decision. If my family couldn't believe in me, I would have to believe enough for all of us. And if they wouldn't support my dream, I'd build it without them. The next morning, I stopped calling home on Sundays. 6 months later, exhausted and nearly broke, I presented my algorithm at a small tech meetup in Oakland. I wore my only professional outfit, a blazer I'd found at a thrift store and a pair of slacks I'd mended 3 times. My hands trembled as I launched my presentation, the memory of my previous failure at the Chamber of Commerce still fresh after all these years. But this time, something different happened. This time, my work spoke for itself. Among the sparse crowd sat Diane Rivera, a veteran venture capitalist known for her unerring eye for potential. As others filtered out after the presentations, she approached me, her expression unreadable. "Your predictive model needs work," she said bluntly, and my heart sank. Then she handed me her card. "But the foundation is brilliant. Call my office tomorrow. I think we can help each other." That meeting changed everything. With Diane's guidance and seed funding, I launched Horizon Analytics from a tiny office in Oakland. The early days were brutal. Endless coding sessions, pitched battles for our first clients, nights when I slept under my desk rather than waste time commuting. But for the first time in my life, my so-called failures weren't met with disapproval or mockery. In the startup world, failure was just a step toward success, a necessary part of the journey. Fail fast, learn faster became my new mantra, replacing the shameful label I'd carried for so long. I didn't tell my family about the company. After years of diminished expectations and thinly veiled disappointment, I couldn't bear to see the skepticism in their eyes. Instead, I poured everything into making Horizon successful, letting their voices fade into background noise. 1 year turned into 2. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Horizon grew from just me to a team of 5, then 15. Our client list expanded from local businesses to national brands. I moved from my shared apartment to a small studio of my own, then to a 1-bedroom with a view of the bay. Small victories that felt enormous after years of being the failure. 3 years in, Horizon Analytics secured a partnership with one of the largest retail corporations in America. Our predictive consumer behavior algorithms saved them millions in their first quarter. The tech press took notice. Suddenly, I was no longer invisible. And that's when the first email arrived from Ethan. Saw an article about your company. Sounds impressive. We should catch up sometime. I stared at those words on my screen, emotions I thought I'd buried rising to the surface. After years of silence, after being the family joke, now he wanted to catch up? I left the email unanswered and returned to my work. But more messages followed, from my mother, my father, even Noah. Each one increasingly interested in my little company, as they called it. Each one acting as if they'd supported me all along. Now, staring at Ethan's latest email about a family investment opportunity, I feel a complex mix of emotions. Part of me wants to respond with all the hurt and anger I've carried. Part of me craves the validation I've sought for so long, but a newer, stronger part knows I've moved beyond needing their approval. I close the email without responding and stand up, smoothing down my designer suit, a far cry from that thrift store blazer. Through the glass walls, I can see my team hard at work, building something remarkable. These people believed in me, when no one else would. These people never called me a failure. I step out of my office, ready for my 2 o'clock meeting. Whatever my family wants from me now, it can wait. I'm not that invisible girl anymore. I'm not their disappointment, their joke, their failure. I am Morgan Hayes, founder and CEO of Horizon Analytics, and for the first time in my life, I don't need my family to see my worth. I already know it. The meeting with TechFuture's CEO ran longer than expected. By the time I returned to my office, the San Francisco skyline was aglow with evening lights. I dropped into my chair, massaging my temples. We'd landed the biggest contract in Horizon's history, a deal that would propel us past the $15 million valuation mark. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Drinks to celebrate? The team's heading to Skydeck in 20. I smiled, about to reply, when my office phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number I hadn't seen in months. Home. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. After years of disappointing conversations, I'd learned to protect myself. But something, curiosity perhaps, or that stubborn part of me that still sought approval, made me pick up. Morgan Hayes, I answered professionally, as if it might be any business call. Morgan? My mother's voice sounded smaller than I remembered. It's Mom. I know, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Is everything okay? Yes, everything's fine, she said quickly. Better than fine, actually. Your father and I saw you in the Business Chronicle. There was a whole article about your company. Ah, there it was. The reason for the sudden interest after months of silence. Not concern. For me, not genuine connection, but the public recognition of my success. That's right, I said. They did a feature on emerging tech companies. We had no idea things were going so well, she continued, her voice brightening. Why didn't you tell us? Your father's showing the article to everyone at the country club. The irony was almost painful. For years, I'd tried to share my dreams, my struggles, my small victories. For years, they'd changed the subject or openly dismissed me. Now that outside validation had arrived, they were suddenly interested. "I've been busy," I said, the understatement of the century. "Well, we're just so proud," she gushed. "Our daughter? The successful businesswoman." Our daughter. Not the failure. Not the disappointment. The successful businesswoman. "Thanks," I managed, unsure what else to say. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Your father's turning 60 next month, and we're having a small gathering at the lake house. The whole family will be there, and we'd love for you to come. You could tell everyone about your company." I nearly laughed. After years of being the family joke, I was suddenly the entertainment, expected to perform my success for their approval. "I'll check my calendar," I said noncommittally. "Things are pretty hectic right now." Of course," she said. "But do try, dear. Everyone's excited to see you. Ethan's bringing his new baby. Did you know you're an aunt again? And—" Noah just made partner at his practice. The familiar pattern emerged. My accomplishments immediately followed by my brother's achievements, as if to maintain the hierarchy, to remind me of my place. "I have to go, Mom. I've got another call coming in." After hanging up, I sat motionless, staring at the skyline. The familiar mixture of hope and hurt swirled inside me. Part of me, a part I hated acknowledging, still craved their validation. The little girl who'd been nicknamed the failure still wanted to prove them wrong. I grabbed my coat and headed toward the elevator. The team was waiting to celebrate, and they at least had believed in me from the beginning. Skydeck Bar was crowded with the usual mix of tech workers and tourists enjoying the panoramic view of the city. My team had claimed a corner table, drinks already flowing. Diane raised her glass as I approached. "To Morgan Hayes," she announced, "the woman who turned a brilliant algorithm into the hottest analytics company in the Bay." The team cheered, and for a moment I let myself bask in their genuine support. These people knew my work, my vision, my drive. They'd never once called me a failure. "Thanks, everyone," I said, settling into the open chair. "But this is a team victory. Every single one of you made this happen." As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, I found myself at the bar beside Diane, ordering another round. "You seem distracted," she said, sharp as ever. "Something on your mind?" I hesitated. Diane wasn't just my investor. She'd become a mentor and, in many ways, the supportive family figure I'd always longed for. Still, I rarely discussed my personal life in professional settings. "My mother called," I said finally. Apparently, they saw the Business Chronicle piece. Diane's expression sharpened with interest. "The family that nicknamed you the failure? Those people?" I'd told her the basics during our early days working together, when we'd pulled all-nighters coding and the personal inevitably mixed with the professional. "The very same," I confirmed. "Suddenly they're so proud and can't wait to see me." "And how do you feel about that?" she asked, signaling the bartender for 2 more drinks. I stared into my glass. Conflicted. Part of me wants to show up in my best suit with a portfolio of press clippings and investor reports to finally get the validation I've been seeking my whole life. And the other part? The other part knows it shouldn't matter anymore, that I've built something valuable without their support or belief. That chasing their approval is a waste of energy. Diane nodded thoughtfully. "Both those feelings make sense. But let me ask you something. If the Business Chronicle hadn't run that story, would they have called?" The question hit like a slap. "No," I admitted. "They wouldn't have." "So they're not seeing you, Morgan. They're seeing the external validation, the public success, the same people who couldn't see your potential when it wasn't obvious to everyone else." I knew she was right, but it still hurt, the realization that even now they didn't really see me. They saw Horizon Analytics, the successful company, not Morgan Hayes, their daughter who'd worked tirelessly to build it. "Here's my advice," Diane continued, her voice gentler now. Go to the party if you want to reconnect with your family. But don't go seeking validation. That ship has sailed. I nodded, grateful for her clarity. And Morgan, remember that you created this success in spite of them, not because of them. Don't let anyone, even family, take that away from you. As we rejoined the team, the conversation flowed to other topics, but Diane's words stayed with me. I'd spent so many years trying to prove my family wrong that I'd never fully acknowledged how much I'd accomplished without them. I decided to attend my father's birthday party, not to seek approval or to showcase my success, but to face my past, with the strength I'd built in their absence. The Lake Tahoe house looked exactly as I remembered. Nestled among towering pines with the crystal-clear lake stretching beyond, it had been the setting for countless family gatherings, and countless moments of feeling invisible. I parked my rental car behind a row of expensive SUVs and luxury sedans, taking a moment to compose myself. Through the large windows, I could see figures moving inside, my family preparing for the celebration I'd almost not attended. The moment I stepped through the door, carrying a carefully selected bottle of scotch for my father, the dynamics shifted palpably. Conversations paused. Heads turned. "Morgan!" My mother rushed forward, enveloping me in a cloud of expensive perfume. "You made it! Don't you look successful?" Not beautiful, not healthy, not happy. Successful. The word choice wasn't lost. On me. "Thanks, Mom," I said, returning her embrace somewhat stiffly. "Where's Dad?" "On the deck, holding court as usual." She lowered her voice. "He's been talking about your company all week. I think he's hoping you might discuss some investment opportunities." And there it was, the real reason for the warm welcome. Not just pride in my accomplishments, but the prospect of financial gain. As I made my way through the crowded living room, I was struck by how little had changed. The same family photos lined the walls, mostly featuring my brother's achievements, with me relegated to group shots. The same relatives clustered in familiar patterns, discussing the same topics. Only I had changed. 5 years ago, I would have circled these rooms desperately seeking approval, dropping hints about my work, hoping someone would ask, would care. Now, I moved through the space with quiet confidence, no longer needing to prove myself. On the deck, my father stood surrounded by his golf buddies, drink in hand. When he spotted me, his face lit up in a way I couldn't remember seeing directed at me before. "Here she is," he announced, gesturing grandly. "Our tech mogul." The group turned, eyes appraising me with new interest. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, handing him the scotch. "I thought you might enjoy this." He examined the label, eyebrows rising in appreciation. "The expensive stuff. Business must be good." I smiled tightly. "It is." "Morgan here," he told his friends, arms suddenly around my shoulders, "has built a multi-million-dollar tech company from scratch. Always knew she had it in her." The blatant revisionism nearly took my breath away. Always knew? This from the man who'd discouraged every entrepreneurial impulse I'd ever had? "Did you?" I asked quietly, the words escaping before I could contain them. A momentary flicker of discomfort crossed his face, quickly replaced with a jovial smile. "Of course, you were always the creative one." Creative, his polite word for impractical, for disappointing. Morgan. My brother Ethan appeared at my elbow, rescue or interruption, I wasn't sure which. "Got a minute?" I nodded, excusing myself from my father's circle, ignoring the not-so-subtle hints about sharing market insights later. Ethan led me to a quieter corner of the deck. At 35, he still had the confident bearing of the star quarterback, though his athletic build had softened slightly with age and corporate lunches. "It's good to see you," he said, and I was surprised to detect genuine warmth. "You look, well." "Thanks," I replied cautiously. "Congratulations on the new baby. Mom mentioned it." Yeah, little Emma. She's with the nanny today. These things run too late for her. He cleared his throat. Listen, I've been meaning to reach out. That email I sent about the investment opportunity. And there it was. The real reason for the sudden brotherly interest. What about it? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I've got this startup idea, sports analytics platform. With your technology and my industry connections, we could dominate the market. The irony was almost too perfect. The brother who'd coined my nickname, who'd dismissed my ideas for years, now wanted to leverage my success for his own venture. Interesting, I said, neither committing nor refusing. Send me a business plan. I'll have my team look it over. He blinked, clearly expecting either immediate enthusiasm or outright rejection. Your team? My executive team, I clarified. We have a formal review process for potential investments and partnerships. But this is family, he protested. I met his gaze steadily. Exactly why we need to be professional about it. Before he could respond, my other brother Noah appeared, his wife Clara in tow. Unlike Ethan, Noah had always been more subtle in his dismissal of me. Less outright mockery, more patronizing concern. The prodigal sister returns, he said, giving me a brief hug. Congratulations on all your success. We always said you'd find your way eventually. No, they hadn't. They'd said I'd fail, repeatedly and explicitly. But now history was being rewritten before my eyes. Thanks, I said simply, unwilling to feed the fantasy. Clara, always more perceptive than my brother, caught the undercurrent. Your company. Sounds fascinating, Morgan. I'd love to hear more about what you actually do. It was the first genuine interest anyone had shown all evening. As I began explaining Horizon's predictive analytics technology, I noticed other family members drifting closer, listening with newfound respect. For a fleeting moment, I felt what I'd always craved, my family's attention, their recognition. But as I looked at their faces, I realized they weren't seeing me. They were seeing dollar signs, connections, opportunities. The catalyst had arrived, not in the form I'd expected, but powerful nonetheless. In their sudden interest, in their transparent attempts to connect my success to themselves, I finally saw the truth that would set me free. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had outgrown it. And that realization would change everything. The drive back to San Francisco the day after my father's birthday party was therapeutic. Windows down, music loud, the coastal highway unfurling before me. I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of seeking approval, of trying to prove my worth to people who couldn't see it, was finally lifting. My phone buzzed with yet another message from Ethan, the third since I'd left the party. Just checking if you had a chance to look at my proposal. Great seeing you yesterday. I smiled wryly. He hadn't even sent a proposal yet, just mentioned the vague concept of one. But already he was following up, showing more interest in me than he had in the previous 5 years combined. As I merged onto the Golden Gate Bridge, the San Francisco skyline coming into view, I made a decision. No more reacting to my family's agenda. From now on, I would set the terms of our relationship, or lack thereof. When I reached my apartment, I opened my laptop and did something I'd been contemplating for months. I started a blog. Not a corporate one for Horizon, but a personal one called The Failure Chronicles. In my first post, I wrote honestly about growing up with the nickname, about how it had shaped me, about the struggle to believe in myself when no one else did. Success isn't proving your critics wrong, I wrote. It's realizing their opinions never defined your worth in the first place. I hesitated before hitting publish, my finger hovering over the button. This was personal, vulnerable, everything I'd been trained to hide. But hiding had only protected my family from the consequences of their actions, never me from the pain of them. I hit publish. By morning, the post had been shared thousands of times. my inbox filled with messages from people sharing similar stories of family doubt, of breaking free, of redefining success on their own terms. What had started as personal catharsis was striking a chord with others who'd walked similar paths. Diane called as I was reading through the comments. "Your blog post," she said without preamble. "It's going viral in tech circles." My stomach dropped. "Is that a problem?" "I didn't mention Horizon explicitly." "Problem?" She laughed. "Morgan, it's brilliant. Authentic, relatable content that shows the human behind the CEO? That's marketing gold. But more importantly, it's brave. You're finally owning your story." I exhaled, relieved. It felt right. After seeing them all at the party, watching them try to rewrite history. "So what's your next move?" she asked. "Because your brother Ethan has called the office 3 times this morning." Of course he had. "Tell him all potential partnerships go through the standard review process, no exceptions." "Even for family?" There was approval in her voice. "Especially for family," I confirmed. "And Diane? I'm thinking of launching a mentorship program through Horizon for young women in tech who don't have family support." "I love it," she said immediately. "Use your platform to create what you needed. That's true success." After we hung up, I felt energized. Writing that blog post had been my first step, acknowledging my past without letting it define me. The mentorship program would be another step forward, transforming my pain into purpose. Over the next few weeks, the failure chronicles continued to gain traction. I shared more stories. The professor who discouraged me from presenting at that tech conference, the startup that passed on my algorithm because I didn't fit their culture, the countless times I'd nearly given up. But unlike my family's narratives, which had cast me as inherently deficient, these stories had a different message. Obstacles weren't evidence of my inadequacy, but stepping stones toward growth. The response was overwhelming. People shared their own stories in the comments. Tech publications requested interviews. A publisher reached out about a potential book deal. And my family? They were suddenly everywhere. My mother left voicemails about the concerning blog posts. "Do you really need to air our family's private matters this way? Have you considered how this makes your father feel?" Ethan's messages grew increasingly desperate. "About that startup idea, I've put together some preliminary numbers. Can we meet this week? Also saw your blog. Bit harsh, don't you think? We were just kids." Noah, ever the calculated one, took a different approach. "Your blog's getting impressive engagement metrics. Have you considered monetization strategies? I know some people who could help optimize your platform." I responded to none of them. Instead, I channeled my energy into launching the Horizon Pathfinders program, a mentorship initiative for young women in STEM from unsupportive backgrounds. We would provide not just technical guidance but emotional support, funding for conference attendance, networking opportunities, all the things I'd needed but never received. The morning we announced the program, I arrived at the office to find flowers on my desk with a card from my father. "So proud of your continued success. Let's discuss how the family can get involved with your new initiative. Love, Dad." I placed the card in my drawer without responding and headed into the conference room where 20 brilliant young women were waiting for the program's kickoff meeting. Looking at their faces, eager, uncertain, hopeful, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about proving my family wrong anymore. It was about creating something meaningful from my experience, about ensuring these women wouldn't have to fight the same battles alone. "Welcome to Horizon Pathfinders," I began. "Many of you are here because the traditional support systems failed you, because someone looked at your passion, your drive, your brilliant ideas, and labeled them impractical, because someone called you a failure." The room was silent, attention absolute. "I'm here to tell you that their limited vision is not your destiny. that the people who should have believed in you first don't get to determine your worth. And most importantly, that you're not alone anymore. As I spoke, I realized I was also speaking to my younger self, the girl who'd scribbled business ideas in notebooks no one wanted to read, who'd cried after family dinners where her dreams were treated as jokes, who'd worked 2 jobs to pay for the education her brothers received as a birthright. After the meeting, as the participants networked over coffee, my assistant appeared with an urgent message. "Your brother Noah is in the lobby. Says he won't leave until he speaks with you." I sighed, glancing at the room full of young women who were counting on me. "Tell him he can have 15 minutes after the event ends, not before." And making him wait was a small thing, but significant. A clear message that my priorities had changed. He was no longer automatically entitled to my time or attention. When I finally met him in my office, Noah looked uncharacteristically flustered. Gone was the cool, collected surgeon. In his place was a man whose control was slipping. "What's going on with you, Morgan?" he demanded without preamble. First the blog airing our family's dirty laundry, now this program that's clearly a dig at us. I regarded him calmly from behind my desk. "The program helps promising young women in tech. How exactly is that a dig at you? Don't play innocent. Traditional support systems failed you? The people who should have believed in you first? It's obvious who you're talking about." "Is it?" I asked mildly. "Interesting that you'd immediately assume that's about our family." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Look, I get that you felt underappreciated growing up, but this public campaign is going too far. Dad's friends are reading your blog, his colleagues. It's embarrassing for him." "Embarrassing," I repeated, letting the word hang between us. "Like being called the failure at family dinners? Like having your ideas dismissed for years? Like watching your brothers receive support and encouragement while you're told to lower your expectations?" "That was different," he protested. "We were kids, and parents invest in the sure things. You can't blame them for backing the obvious winners." The casual cruelty of his words, and his complete obliviousness to it, was breathtaking. "Thank you, Noah," I said quietly. "For what?" "For making my point so perfectly. You still don't see it." I stood up, indicating our meeting was over. "I have a company to run and a program to launch. Unlike you, I don't have parents bankrolling my lifestyle, so my time is valuable." His face flushed. "This isn't over. Morgan, the family's discussing options." "Options for what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "For addressing this situation. Your behavior is affecting all of us." I laughed then, a genuine laugh of disbelief. "My behavior? You know what, Noah? For the first time in my life, I don't care how my behavior affects all of you. I'm done measuring my actions by their impact on the Hayes family reputation." "You don't mean that," he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Family is everything." "No," I corrected him, walking to the door. "Family should be supportive. Family should believe in you. Family should lift you up, not tear you down. What we have, that's not family. That's a hierarchy where I was placed firmly at the bottom, and now you're all scrambling because I've built my own ladder." As I opened the door, he made one last attempt. "Dad's considering changing his will, you know, after all this drama." The old Morgan would have flinched, would have backtracked, would have sought to regain favor. But I merely smiled. "He's welcome to do whatever he wants with his money. I built my success without it." After Noah left, I returned to the Pathfinders event, where the energy was palpable. These young women, many of whom had stories similar to mine, were connecting, collaborating, planning. They weren't defined by who didn't believe in them, but by what they could create together. Later that evening, as I walked home along the Embarcadero, watching the sunset paint the bay in shades of gold, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Morgan, it's Grandma Joan. Found your number in your father's study. Read your blog. Wanted you to know. I see you. I always did. They were wrong about you. So proud of what you've built. Would love to talk when you're ready." I stopped walking, reading the message twice. Grandma Joan had always been quiet at family gatherings, observing more than participating. I'd never known her thoughts about how I was treated. For the first time since launching the blog, since confronting my family's narrative, I felt tears prick my eyes. Not from pain or anger, but from the simple power of being seen, truly seen, by someone who had witnessed it all. I typed back, "I'd like that, Grandma. How about lunch this Sunday?" Taking a deep breath of the salt-tinged air, I continued my walk home. The first step wasn't just standing up to my family or sharing my story publicly. It wasn't even launching the mentorship program. The first step was allowing myself to be vulnerable, to connect with those who actually saw my worth, whether they were the young women I was mentoring, my team at Horizon, Diane, or the grandmother who'd been quietly in my corner all along. And with that step, everything began to change. Sunday brunch with Grandma Joan became a weekly tradition. We'd meet at a small cafe by the waterfront, away from the trendy spots frequented by the tech crowd. At 82, my grandmother was sharp as ever, her white hair elegantly styled, her eyes missing nothing. "Your grandfather was the same way, you know," she told me over mimosas, 3 weeks into our new ritual. "Brilliant with patterns, with seeing connections others missed. Your father never understood him either." I nearly choked on my drink. Dad and Grandpa had issues too? I never knew that. She smiled wryly. Richard was the Ethan of his generation, athletic, charismatic, the obvious success story. Harold was quieter, more intellectually driven. Sound familiar? The parallel was striking. So, what happened? Harold built a research firm that revolutionized market analysis in the 70s. She stirred her drink thoughtfully. Richard never quite forgave him for succeeding in a way he couldn't understand or replicate. "So that's why," I began, pieces falling into place, "why your father pushed you toward conventional paths. Why he championed your brother's traditional success?" She nodded. "We repeat what we know, Morgan, even when we don't mean to." This new context didn't excuse my family's behavior, but it helped me understand it. The generational pattern of misunderstanding, of valuing certain types of success while dismissing others. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I asked. "When they were calling me the failure, when they were dismissing everything I tried to build?" Regret flickered across her face. "I should have. By the time I realized history was repeating itself, the pattern was set." She reached across the table, her hand surprisingly strong as it covered mine. "But I'm saying something now, and I'm immensely proud of you for breaking the cycle." Those Sunday brunches became an anchor as my public profile rose. The Failure Chronicles had evolved from personal blog to media phenomenon. I'd been featured in Forbes, invited to speak at conferences, approached about a TED Talk. My inbox, regularly filled with messages from people sharing how my story had inspired them to pursue their own paths, despite family skepticism. Horizon continued to thrive as well. We'd secured a round of Series B funding that pushed our valuation to $18 million. The Pathfinders program was producing its first cohort of success stories. Young women launching their own startups, securing patents, breaking into previously inaccessible spaces in the tech world. My family's attempts to contact me grew increasingly desperate. My mother left tearful voicemails about how I was tearing the family apart. Ethan sent elaborate business proposals, each more generous to Horizon than the last, transparent attempts to attach himself to my success. Noah's wife Clara reached out to mediate, suggesting family therapy sessions. I responded to none of them. Instead, I focused on building a life that aligned with my authentic self. I moved from my downtown apartment to a Victorian house in Thai No valley with a garden for growing herbs and a dedicated studio for painting. A childhood passion I'd abandoned when my art was deemed impractical, but was now reclaiming with adult freedom. I dated without the pressure of finding someone to support me properly, as my mother had always insisted. Some connections faded naturally, others blossomed into meaningful friendships. I no longer measured potential partners against the haze. Family yardstick of success. Most importantly, I built a chosen family of people who saw and valued me completely. Diane with her bracing honesty, my core team at Horizon who'd believed in the vision from day one, fellow entrepreneurs who understood the journey, and of course Grandma Joan, my unexpected ally. 6 months after launching Pathfinders, we hosted a gala to celebrate its success and announce the program's expansion. The event was held at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. The atrium transformed into an elegant reception space where investors mingled with mentees, tech journalists circulated among industry pioneers, and my chosen family gathered to celebrate a vision made real. I was discussing the program's metrics with a potential donor when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I found myself face to face with my father. The shock must have shown on my face. He looked older than at his birthday party, lines of tension. Around his mouth, his normally impeccable appearance slightly rumpled. "Morgan," he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "You look wonderful." I regained my composure quickly. "Dad, this is a surprise." "Your grandmother told me about the event," he admitted. "I hope it's all right that I came." The donor tactfully excused herself, leaving us in an island of awkward silence amid the buzzing crowd. "It's a public event," I said finally. "Would you like a drink?" He nodded, following me to the bar. As we waited, he surveyed the room with undisguised amazement. "This is quite something, Morgan. All these people are here for your program?" "For the mentees, mostly," I corrected him. "They're the future." He accepted the whiskey I handed him, taking a sip before speaking again. "I've been reading your blog." I raised an eyebrow. "All of it?" "Every word." He looked down at his glass. "It's not easy reading, seeing ourselves through your eyes, seeing me through your eyes." "It wasn't easy living it," I replied simply. He nodded slowly. "I imagine not." A pause. "Your grandmother told me about my father's company. Did you know I worked for him briefly, right out of college?" This was news to me. "No. What happened?" "I failed spectacularly." He gave a humorless laugh. "Couldn't grasp the analytics, couldn't see the patterns." He was patient, but eventually we both knew it wasn't working. Another sip of whiskey. "I went into insurance instead. Safe, stable. Nothing like the revolutionary work he did. Nothing like what you're doing now." I studied him, this man I'd spent decades trying to please. For the first time, I saw not just the dismissive father but the son who had also felt inadequate, measured, against a standard he couldn't meet. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I realize now that I've been—" He struggled visibly. "Projecting. Seeing your passion for technology, for innovation. It reminded me of him, of how I failed to follow in his footsteps, so I pushed you towards safer paths." "You called me the failure," I reminded him, my voice steady. "Not my finest moment as a father," he acknowledged, the admission clearly difficult. "When you struggled at first, it was almost a relief, confirmation that I'd been right to discourage you. When you succeeded—" He trailed off. "It threatened your worldview," I finished for him. He nodded, meeting my eyes directly. "I came here tonight to say I was wrong, Morgan. About all of it. Your vision, your determination, your unconventional path. These weren't weaknesses. They were strengths I was too limited to recognize." The apology I'd waited decades to hear, delivered without excuses, without qualifications. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. "Thank you for saying that," I managed finally. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "After reading your blog, after seeing all you've built despite us, not because of us, I understand the damage is done. But I hoped you might let me get to know the person you've become. Not as the daughter I tried to mold, but as the remarkable woman who succeeded on her own terms." Before I could respond, Diane approached, protectively positioning herself beside me. "Morgan, it's almost time for your speech." She eyed my father with barely concealed suspicion. "Diane, this is my father, Richard Hayes. Dad, this is Diane Rivera, Horizon's founding investor and my mentor." The introduction hung in the air for a moment before Diane extended her hand. "So you're the one who didn't see what you had." To his credit, he didn't flinch. "I deserved that. And yes, I was blind in ways I'm only beginning to understand." Diane's expression softened marginally. "Well, your daughter has exceptional vision, for data patterns and for people worth investing, and you should be proud." "I am," he said simply. "More than I've shown." As Diane guided me toward the stage, I glanced back at my father, standing alone at the edge of a room full of people who recognized my worth without hesitation. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. How many times had I been the outsider at family gatherings, visible but unseen? Taking the podium, I surveyed the audience. My team from Horizon, cheering enthusiastically from the front row. The Pathfinder's mentees, their faces shining with possibility. Grandma Joan, elegant in midnight blue, nodding encouragement. And my father, watching from the periphery, finally seeing me. 3 years ago, I began, I was called a failure for the last time. Not because the person stopped saying it, but because I stopped believing it. As I shared the Pathfinder's vision, outlining our expansion plans and introducing the mentees who would lead them, I felt a profound sense of alignment. This was the life I was meant to build, using my success not just to prove critics wrong, but to create opportunities for others facing similar barriers. After the speech, as the crowd mingled over dessert and champagne, I found my father speaking with Grandma Joan. "Your speech was powerful," he said as I approached. "I'm sorry I missed the others." "Thank you for coming tonight," I said, meaning it. His presence, his apology, they didn't erase the past, but they opened a possibility I hadn't considered, that people could change, could grow to see beyond their limited perspectives. "I should get back to my guests," I added. "But maybe we could have dinner sometime? Just the two of us?" The surprise and hope in his eyes was answer enough. As the evening wound down, I stood on the museum's terrace, looking out at the city lights. Diane joined me, champagne in hand. "So, Daddy?" "Hayes showed up," she remarked. "Unexpected plot twist." I smiled. "Very." "You're considering rebuilding that bridge," she observed. "Are you sure that's wise?" "Not a bridge," I clarified. "A new path entirely. Not back to being the disappointment seeking approval, but forward as equals. As adults who might find some common ground." She considered this. "Just be careful. People can change, but not overnight. And some damage can't be undone." "I know," I assured her. "Trust me, I'm entering with eyes wide open. But holding on to anger requires energy I'd rather put elsewhere." "Fair enough." She clinked her glass against mine. "To new paths, then, wherever they may lead." As we returned inside, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed since that catalytic moment when I decided to stop seeking validation from those who couldn't give it. I'd expected the journey to be lonely. Breaking away from family usually is. Instead, I'd found connection, purpose, and a sense of belonging more authentic than anything I'd known before. The new path wasn't about rejection or rebellion anymore. It was about creation, building a life, a company, a community aligned with my true self. And perhaps most surprisingly, it was leaving space for others to evolve as well, to catch up if they chose to, while I continued moving forward. The path ahead was uncharted, but for the first time, that felt exhilarating rather than terrifying. I was no longer the girl nicknamed the failure, desperately seeking approval. I was Morgan Hayes, creating success on my own terms and redefining family in the process. Dinner with my father became a monthly occurrence, cautious at first, then gradually more comfortable as we established a new dynamic. We avoided discussing the rest of the family by unspoken agreement, focusing instead on building a relationship independent of the past. I learned about his childhood, his complex relationship with his own father, the pressure he'd felt to measure up. He listened with genuine interest as I explained Horizon's technology, his questions becoming more insightful over time as he educated himself on the industry. "You remind me of him, he said during our fourth dinner as we shared dessert at a quiet restaurant overlooking the bay. "Your grandfather. Same intensity, same ability to see connections others miss." "Grandma Joan says the same thing," I replied. "I wish I'd known him better." "I wish I'd understood him better," my father admitted. "Maybe then I wouldn't have." He trailed off. "Made the same mistakes with me?" I finished gently. He nodded, the regret evident in his eyes. "History repeats itself when we're not paying attention." These conversations were healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Not because they erased the hurt, nothing could do that, but because they helped me understand it wasn't personal. The nickname, the dismissal, the lack of support, they stemmed from my father's own insecurities, his limited perception, not my inherent worth. Meanwhile, Horizon continued its meteoric rise. We'd expanded to new offices, doubled our staff, and launched an international division. The Pathfinders program had grown into a standalone nonprofit with corporate sponsorships and a waiting list of applicants. The Failure Chronicles had evolved as well. What began as personal catharsis had become a platform for others to share their stories of overcoming family doubt and finding success on their own terms. A publisher had approached me about a book deal, and we were in final negotiations. Life was good, challenging but fulfilling, busy but purposeful. Then came the email that shattered my carefully constructed piece. "Morgan," it began, "I've respected your need for space these past months, but family matters have arisen that require your attention. Your mother is organizing a family reunion next month at the lake house. Your presence is expected. We have important business to discuss regarding the family trust. Noah." I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold beside my keyboard. The tone was pure Noah, formal, authoritative, with the assumption of compliance. No acknowledgement of our last conversation, no recognition of how things had changed. "Everything okay?" Raj asked, pausing at my office door. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Family?" I said simply, turning the screen toward him. He grimaced in understanding. Though I kept my personal and professional lives mostly separate, my team knew the basics of my history. The blog had made certain details public knowledge. Anyway, "What will you do?" he asked. I considered the question seriously. A year ago, I would have ignored the summons entirely. 6 months ago, I might have sent a polite but firm refusal. But now, with the foundations of a new relationship, with my father, the situation was more complex. "I think," I said slowly, "it's time to clear the air once and for all." That evening, I called Grandma Joan for perspective. "A family reunion?" she repeated. "That's unusually collaborative for Evelyn. She typically prefers controlling smaller gatherings." "Noah mentioned the family trust," I said. "Do you know anything about that?" There was a pause, then a sigh. Your grandfather's trust. I wondered when this would come up. What trust? I asked, confused. I didn't know Grandpa Harold had a trust. He established it for his grandchildren, she explained. Equal shares, to be distributed when the youngest grandchild, that would be you, turned 30 or achieved significant professional success, whichever came first. I did the math quickly. I turned 30 next month. Yes, she confirmed, and with Horizon's valuation, I believe you've more than satisfied the professional success requirement regardless. How much are we talking about? I asked, though. The amount seemed almost irrelevant. Harold was very good at what he did, she said simply. The trust has been well managed. Each grandchild's share would be substantial, in the millions. Suddenly, the timing of this reunion, the renewed family interest, made perfect sense. It wasn't just about my success with Horizon, it was about Grandpa Harold's money. They knew about this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Richard and Evelyn have been trustees since Harold passed. Noah and Ethan were informed when they turned 21. Her voice held a note of apology. You were supposed to be told then as well. But I wasn't, I said flatly. No, she confirmed. I questioned Richard about it once. He said he worried the knowledge would discourage your work ethic, that you needed to make something of yourself without expecting a handout. The double standard was breathtaking. My brothers had known about their inheritance for years, secure in the knowledge of that financial safety net, while I had been deliberately kept in the dark, another way to maintain the family hierarchy, to ensure I remained in my assigned place. I see, I said, my voice too calm. Thank you for telling me the truth, Grandma. What will you do? She asked, echoing Raj's earlier question. I thought about the monthly dinners with my father, the tentative new relationship we'd been building. Had it all been a strategy? A way to ensure I'd cooperate when the trust distribution came up? I'm going to that reunion, I decided aloud, but not for the reasons they think. The Hayes family lake house looked exactly the same as it had during my father's birthday. Imposing, immaculate, a showpiece of upper-middle-class success. As I parked my car behind the familiar row of luxury vehicles, I felt a momentary urge to turn around, to drive back to the city and my chosen family. Instead, I grabbed the document folder from my passenger seat and headed for the front door. My mother answered, her surprise at my appearance quickly masked by a practiced hostess smile. Morgan, you came. Everyone's on the back deck. Is Dad here? I asked, refusing to play along with the pretense of normality. Of course, she said, her smile faltering slightly. He's been quite insistent about your inclusion today. That, at least, was something. Perhaps our dinners hadn't been entirely strategic after all. I followed her through the house to the deck, where the family tableau awaited. Ethan and his wife Melissa with their 2 children, Noah and Clara, my father standing at the grill, all of them looking like a perfect family gathering advertisement. Morgan, my father said, putting down his grilling tongs and moving toward me. There was genuine warmth in his expression, but also wariness. He sensed my mood. Dad, I acknowledged, then turned to face the group. I'm here because Noah said we needed to discuss the family trust. The direct approach silenced the casual conversations. My mother's smile became fixed. Ethan and Noah exchanged glances. Well, my mother said with forced brightness, we were planning to enjoy lunch first, catch up a bit. I'm not here to pretend we're one big happy family, I interrupted. I'm here to address the matter of Grandpa Harold's trust, the one I was supposed to be informed about when I turned 21, but wasn't. My father set down his drink. Morgan, we can discuss this civilly. We can, I agreed. Let's start with why I wasn't told about my inheritance when my brothers were. Silence fell over the deck. My mother shot a reproachful look at my father, clearly blaming him for my knowledge. It wasn't a matter of excluding you, Noah finally said, assuming his usual role as family spokesman. It was about ensuring you developed independence. That's interesting, I replied, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. Because from where I stand, it looks exactly like exclusion. Like one more way to ensure I remained the failure, while you enjoyed the security of knowing millions awaited you. You're being dramatic, Ethan interjected. No one was trying to keep you down. I turned to him, eyebrows raised. Really? You coined the nickname, Ethan. You made sure it stuck. Every achievement I ever had was undercut by that label. Every struggle was confirmed by it. We were kids, he protested, the same excuse he'd used in his message months ago. And when we weren't, I pressed. When you were adults who continued the pattern? When you dismissed my business ideas but now want to partner for my connections? When you, I turned to Noah, suggested I needed someone to support me properly because my career choice wasn't legitimate. Noah at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. Perspectives change. We've all grown up. Have you? I asked, quietly. Because from what I can see, the only thing that's changed is that I'm successful now. Success you want to attach yourselves to. Success that qualifies me for an inheritance you never thought I'd earn. My mother stepped forward, her composure slipping. That's not fair, Morgan. We've always wanted what's best for you. No, I corrected her. You wanted what was easiest for you, a daughter who fit neatly into your expectations. Who didn't challenge the family narrative of who was valuable and who wasn't. I opened the document folder I'd brought, removing several papers. I've been doing some research since learning about the trust. Interesting structure Grandpa Harold created. Each grandchild can choose to take their portion as a lump sum, or reinvest it into a venture of their choice, with the potential for greater returns. Noah frowned. How did you get those documents? Grandma Joan is still a trustee, I reminded him. She was quite willing to provide copies. Unlike some, she believes in transparency. So you've come to claim your share, Ethan said, somehow making it sound like greed rather than rightful inheritance. Actually, I said, placing the papers on the patio table, I've come to inform you of my decision regarding my portion. I'm designating it to fully fund the Pathfinders Foundation for the next decade. Every dollar. The declaration landed like a thunderclap. My family stared at me, expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. You can't be serious, Noah sputtered. That's millions of dollars. I'm well aware, I replied calmly. I've already submitted the paperwork to the trust administrators. Grandma Joan co-signed yesterday. But, my mother began. But, what? I challenged. But I should keep it? I built a multi-million-dollar company without knowing this money existed. I don't need it. It's your inheritance, my father said quietly. Your grandfather wanted you to have it. And I'm choosing. What to do with it, I replied, softening slightly at his concerned expression. I'm honoring his legacy by investing in young women who remind me of myself. Brilliant minds who lack family support, who've been told they'll fail before they've been given a chance to succeed. I gathered the documents back into my folder. The paperwork is already filed. I just came to inform you in person as a courtesy. You did this to spite us, Ethan accused, anger replacing his initial shock. I shook my head. That's the difference between us, Ethan. Not everything is about this family. This decision isn't about hurting you. It's about helping others. About creating something meaningful from my experience. So that's it? Noah demanded. You show up, drop this bomb, and leave? What about rebuilding relationships? What about moving forward as a family? The question surprised me, coming from him. Is that what you want? I asked. Because all evidence suggests you want access to my success, not a genuine relationship with me. That's not true, my father protested, and I believed he, at least, meant it. Then prove it, I challenged, looking around at each of them. A family isn't defined by sharing a trust fund or showing up for obligatory reunions. It's built on mutual respect, on genuine support, on seeing each other for who we really are. I turned to leave, then paused, turning back with one final thought. For what it's worth, I don't call myself the failure anymore. Neither should you. As I walked through the house toward the front door, I heard footsteps behind me. My father caught up as I reached my car. "Morgan, wait." His voice held no anger, only concern. "Are you sure about this decision? It's your inheritance." I smiled at him, the tension easing slightly. "I'm sure, Dad. The money will do more. Good funding Pathfinders than sitting in my bank account." He nodded slowly. "Your grandfather would have approved, I think. He always valued purpose over profit." "Will we still have dinner next month?" I asked, suddenly unsure where we stood. "I'd like that," he said, relief evident in his face. "This doesn't change anything between us." As I drove away from the lake house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation hadn't been about getting revenge or proving my worth. It had been about standing in my truth, about refusing to participate in the old dynamics that had defined me for so long. I'd faced the source of my pain directly, not with rage or bitterness, but with clarity and purpose. I'd reclaimed my narrative, my inheritance, and my right to define success on my own terms. And in doing so, I'd discovered something important. True confrontation isn't about tearing others down to build yourself up. It's about standing firmly in your worth, regardless of who can see it. The months following the confrontation at the lake house were some of the most productive of my career. Freed from the last vestiges of seeking family approval, I channeled my energy into expanding Horizon's reach and cementing the Pathfinder's Foundation's future. With my inheritance allocated to fund the foundation, we secured a permanent headquarters. In downtown San Francisco, a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and abundant natural light, where mentees could work alongside established tech professionals in a collaborative environment. The space quickly became known as an incubator for the industry's most innovative female talent. My relationship with my father continued to develop cautiously. Our monthly dinners became a consistent bright spot, spaces where we could relate as adults without the weight of family dynamics. He never mentioned the trust again, seemingly accepting my decision, though I occasionally caught him watching me with a mixture of pride and regret that suggested he was still processing the daughter he'd failed to see for so many years. The rest of my family maintained a careful distance. My mother sent occasional texts about neutral topics, the weather, a recipe she thought I might like, polite inquiries about my health. Ethan withdrew completely, his business proposals abandoned. Noah, surprisingly, made one tentative overture, inviting me to his daughter's piano recital, which I attended briefly, exchanging cordial but guarded pleasantries. Life settled into a new rhythm, one defined by my choices rather than reactions to family expectations. I dated casually, built deeper friendships, explored interests beyond work. The trauma of being the failure didn't disappear, but it receded, becoming a chapter in my story rather than its defining theme. Then came the call that changed everything. I was in Tokyo, speaking at a Women in Tech conference, when Diane reached me at my hotel. Her voice, normally composed, held an edge that immediately put me on alert. "Morgan, there's a situation developing. Innotech is making a move." Innotech was our primary competitor, a larger analytics company that had been trying to poach our talent and clients for years. "What kind of move?" I asked, instantly shifting into CEO mode despite the jet lag. "They're preparing a hostile takeover bid, $20 million for controlling interest." I sat down abruptly on the edge of the hotel bed. "That's aggressive. Our valuation is higher than that." "It's not about fair market value," Diane said grimly. "It's about leverage. And Morgan. They have leverage. What do you mean? There was a pause, then. They've been quietly acquiring Horizon shares, small amounts, different shell companies, staying under the reporting threshold, but combined. How much? I demanded, my stomach tightening. 28%, she said, just shy of what they'd need for a board vote. I did the math quickly. They'd need another 10% at minimum. Exactly. And they're approaching our smaller investors with premium offers. Another pause. Including your family. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My family? What are you talking about? Ethan and Noah, she clarified. They each hold 3% of Horizon, purchased through a venture fund last year. You didn't know? I hadn't known. The shock was physical, a cold wave washing through me. My brothers had bought into my company secretly and now held shares that, if sold to Innotech, could tip the balance toward a hostile takeover. I'll be on the next flight back, I said, already mentally packing. Call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow afternoon. The 14-hour flight gave me too much time to think. How had my brothers acquired Horizon shares without my knowledge? We had protocols for large stock purchases, transparency requirements. Someone had deliberately kept this information from me. And now those shares in the company I'd built from nothing, the company they'd predicted would fail, could be the deciding factor in whether I retained control or watched my vision dismantled by competitors. The irony was almost too perfect. My success, which they'd dismissed for years, was now valuable enough to be weaponized against me. By the time I arrived in San Francisco, operating on adrenaline and airline coffee, a clearer picture had emerged. Raj met me at the airport, briefing me as we drove directly to the office. Early last year, Westlake Ventures purchased a 6% stake, he explained, referring to a mid-sized venture fund. Standard transaction, all above board. What we didn't know was that Ethan and Noah Hayes were silent partners in a sub-fund, each controlling half of that investment. And Westlake is considering Innotech's offer? I confirmed. They've been approached, Raj nodded grimly. Premium of 30% over market value. Hard to turn down from a fiduciary standpoint. Unless the controlling partners have other motivations, I noted. Exactly. Your brothers are the wild cards here, with their shares plus what Innotech has already acquired. They'd have enough for the takeover, I finished. When is Innotech making their official move? Their board votes next week. Our intelligence suggests they'll make the public offer immediately after. I stared out the window at the San Francisco streets flashing by. So I have less than a week to convince my brothers, who I publicly confronted and whose inheritance I rejected, not to sell their shares to a competitor who wants to dismantle everything I've built. Raj's expression was sympathetic. That's about the size of it. The board meeting that afternoon was tense. Our options were limited. We could try to find friendly investors to purchase shares at a premium, potentially diluting existing stakeholders. We could pursue a white knight merger with a more compatible company, or we could attempt to convince key shareholders, specifically my brothers, to reject Innotech's offers. From a purely business perspective, our CFO argued, the white knight approach makes the most sense. We find a compatible company, negotiate favorable terms, preserve as much of Horizon's identity and mission as possible. That still means losing control, I pointed out. Diluting our vision, compromising on pathfinders. Sometimes compromise is the best outcome in a crisis, he countered. Innotech would gut everything. A friendly merger at least preserves the core. The discussion continued for hours, strategies proposed and discarded, financial models reviewed, potential partner companies evaluated. Through it all, I remained acutely aware of the central irony. My family, who had dismissed my business acumen for years, now held significant power over my company's fate. After the meeting, I retreated to my office, staring out at the city as night fell. Diane found me there, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. Quite a homecoming, she said, handing me one. I accepted it with a humorless laugh. Not exactly what I had planned. She settled into the chair across from me. So, what's the play? The family angle or the business angle? Both, I admitted. I need to understand their motivations before I can counter effectively. And if they're motivated by revenge? She asked, ever the pragmatist. If this is their response to the trust confrontation? The possibility had been haunting me since I'd learned of their shareholdings. What sweeter revenge than to gain control of the company I'd built, the success they'd never believed possible? Then, I'll have to appeal to something stronger than vengeance, I said. Self-interest, perhaps. Or family loyalty, Diane suggested, surprising me. I raised an eyebrow. The Hayes family isn't exactly known for that. Not historically, she agreed. But dynamics change. People change sometimes. She studied me over her glass. Your father has. She was right. Against all expectations, my father and I had built something resembling a healthy relationship. Perhaps there was potential with my brothers as well. Not for the close bond we'd never had, but for a mutual respect that could preserve what I'd created. I'll talk to them, I decided. Separately, starting with Ethan. Diane nodded approvingly. Divide and conquer, smart. Not exactly, I corrected her. More like, recognize and acknowledge. They're individuals with different motivations. I need to understand what each one wants. I spent the night preparing, reviewing Horizon's financials, projecting how different scenarios might play out, crafting arguments that might resonate with my brother's distinct personalities. By morning, I had a strategy, imperfect, but the best I could manage under the circumstances. Ethan agreed to meet me for breakfast at a neutral location, a busy cafe where neither of us would make a scene. He arrived exactly on time, dressed in the impeccable business casual that was his trademark, the former quarterback still fit and commanding at 37. Morgan, he greeted me with cautious formality, sliding into the booth across from me. This is unexpected. Is it? I countered. You own 3% of my company, a company that's facing a hostile takeover bid. I'd think a meeting would be expected. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I see you've discovered our investment. What I haven't discovered, I said, is why you kept it secret, or why you'd consider selling to Innotech. Business is business, he replied, his tone deliberately casual. Investments rise and fall. When better offers come along, smart investors consider them. I studied him across the table. This brother who had coined my nickname, who had framed so much of my self-perception through childhood and beyond. For the first time, I wondered if his confidence was as absolute as it appeared. This isn't about the investment, I said quietly. If it were, you would have approached me directly, negotiated favorable terms. This is about something else. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Not everything revolves around family drama, Morgan. And yet here we are, I observed. You secretly buy into the company your failure sister built, then position yourself to help a competitor take it over. That seems personal to me. For a long moment, he was silent, studying his coffee as if it might contain answers. When he finally spoke, his voice held a note I'd rarely heard from him: vulnerability. Do you have any idea what it's like? He asked. Watching your little sister build a tech empire from nothing while your own career plateaus. Hearing everyone talk about Morgan Hayes, the brilliant innovator, while you're still trading on a college football reputation from 15 years ago? The admission startled me. Ethan, jealous of my success? Ethan, feeling inadequate compared. To me, the role reversal was so complete it left me momentarily speechless. I didn't know you felt that way, I managed finally. Of course you didn't, he said, a hint of the old bitterness returning. You were too busy building your perfect narrative, The overlooked genius who proved everyone wrong. Never mind that some of us were working just as hard in less flashy fields, achieving solid if unspectacular results. So this is revenge, I concluded, for succeeding where you didn't. It's business, he insisted, but his eyes told a different story. A good opportunity. It's sabotage, I corrected. Him. And it won't give you what you want, Ethan. Destroying Horizon won't build your career or your self-worth. Easy for you to say from the top of your $12 million company. I leaned forward, holding his gaze. Do you think it was easy getting here? Do you think I didn't face 1,000 rejections, work 80-hour weeks, risk everything I had? The difference wasn't opportunity, Ethan. It was perseverance despite being told I would fail. By everyone, including you. Something shifted in his expression, not quite remorse, but recognition. What do you want, Morgan? I want you not to sell your shares to Innotech, I said simply. Not because we're family, but because Horizon's mission matters. Because we're expanding opportunities for women who've been overlooked, just like I was. Because destroying that out of jealousy or spite would be something you'd regret. And what do I get in return? He asked, the businessman reasserting himself. I'd anticipated this question. A seat on Horizon's advisory board. Not the main board, I won't compromise governance, but a role with real input on strategic direction. Your experience in traditional corporate structures would be valuable as we scale. His eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. You'd want my input? After everything? I'm not offering out of sentiment, I clarified. Your business experience is different from mine. That perspective has value, regardless of our history. He studied me with new eyes, reassessing. I'll consider it, he said finally. No promises. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. As we parted outside the cafe, I felt a subtle shift in our dynamic. Not reconciliation exactly, but a movement toward mutual recognition that might, in time, evolve into respect. Noah proved more challenging. He declined my invitation to meet in person, suggesting a video call. Instead, maintaining control of the interaction in typical Noah fashion. When his face appeared on my screen that afternoon, his expression was the studied neutrality of a negotiator holding his cards close. I assume this is about the Innotech situation, he said without preamble. It is, I confirmed. Though I'm curious why you invested in Horizon secretly in the first place. A flicker of something, defensiveness perhaps, crossed his features. It was a sound financial decision. Your company's growth metrics were impressive. So impressive that you couldn't approach me directly? That you had to hide behind a venture fund? He sighed, his composure slipping slightly. Would you have welcomed my investment after everything that had happened? After the scene at the lake house? He had a point, though I wasn't ready to concede it. We'll never know, will we? But what I do know is that selling to Innotech would destroy everything Horizon stands for, everything the Pathfinder's Foundation is building. Business evolves, he said with clinical detachment. Companies get acquired. It's the natural life cycle. This isn't about business evolution, I challenged. This is about control. About whether the vision I built survives or gets dismantled for parts. Perhaps, he allowed. But sentiment doesn't belong in investment decisions. I studied him through the screen. This brother who had always been the most calculating, the most strategic, who had never openly mocked me like Ethan, but had dismissed me in more subtle, perhaps more damaging ways. What do you really want, Noah? I asked directly. Is it the premium Innotech is offering? Is it influence over Horizon? Or is it something else entirely? For a moment, his mask slipped, revealing a complexity I'd rarely glimpsed. Maybe I wanted to be part of something meaningful, he admitted. Something that's changing the world, not just maintaining the status quo. The confession surprised me. Noah, the pragmatic surgeon, yearning for meaning beyond his established path? Then why help destroy it? I asked more gently. Inotech's offer is compelling, he said, but I could hear the hesitation. Their resources could scale what you've built, while gutting its core purpose, I countered. You know that's how acquisitions work. They keep the technology, discard the vision. He was silent for a long moment, considering. What are you proposing instead? I laid out my offer, similar to Ethan's but tailored to Noah's interests. A role advising on Pathfinder's healthcare initiatives, leveraging his medical background to expand our support for women in health tech. Not charity, but a genuine opportunity to contribute meaningfully while protecting his investment. I'll need time to think, he said finally. Inotech's board votes next week, I reminded him. I need your decision before then. As the call ended, I felt the full weight of the crisis descend. I had made my best case to both brothers, offering genuine value rather than emotional appeals. Now all I could do was wait and prepare for either outcome. The next few days passed in a blur of contingency planning. If my brothers rejected Inotech's offer, we would restructure our board to better protect against future takeover attempts. If they accepted, we would pursue the White Knight merger, salvaging what we could of Horizon's mission. 3 days before Inotech's board vote, my father called, asking to meet urgently. We convened at a quiet park near the Horizon offices, the neutral ground seeming appropriate for what might be a difficult conversation. I've spoken with your brothers, he said as we walked along the tree-lined path, about the Inotech situation. I tensed, bracing for bad news. And I owe you an apology, he said, surprising me. Another one. I knew about their investment in Horizon. In fact, I encouraged it. You what? I stopped walking, turning to face him directly. He had the decency to look ashamed. After your confrontation at the lake house, after you donated your inheritance to the foundation, I suggested they invest in your company. I thought it might be a way to rebuild bridges. By secretly buying shares? Without telling me? The hurt and confusion in my voice were evident. He sighed heavily. I didn't fully understand the implications. I thought financial involvement might lead to genuine interest, to respect for what you've built. I never anticipated a hostile takeover situation. The revelation stung. Just when I'd begun to trust our new relationship, to believe in his changed perspective, this emerged. Another example of Hayes' family manipulation, however well-intentioned. Are they selling to Inotech? I asked, the only question that mattered now. They haven't decided, he said. But Morgan, I want you to know I've told them I think it would be a mistake. Not just financially, but morally. Helping destroy what you've built out of jealousy or spite would be unforgivable. His support, though welcome, came too late to change the fundamental dynamics at play. My brothers would make their decisions based on their own calculations, not our father's belated guidance. Thank you for telling me, I said finally, and for supporting my position. But this is between me and them now. It has to be. He nodded, understanding. As we parted, I realized we had reached a crucial juncture, not just for Horizon's future, but for my own. The decisions made in the coming days would determine whether I could maintain control of my company and whether reconciliation with my family was truly possible or merely a comforting illusion. The crisis had arrived, forcing me to confront fundamental questions. Was I willing to compromise my vision to preserve relationships? Was I prepared to lose everything I'd built if my brothers chose revenge over reason? And most importantly, who would I be on the other side of this challenge, regardless of the outcome? As I returned to the office, these questions echoed in my mind. The answers, I knew, would define not just Horizon's future, but my own. The weekend before Innotex, board vote passed in a haze of strategy sessions and contingency planning. I barely left the office, sustaining myself on delivery food and too much coffee as we mapped out possible futures for the company I'd built from nothing. By Sunday evening, we had 3 clear paths forward, each with its own sacrifices and compromises. If my brothers rejected Innotech's offer, we'd restructure our board and shareholding patterns to prevent future vulnerability. If one brother sold but not the other, we'd pursue a targeted fundraising round to dilute Innotech's influence. If both sold, we'd initiate the White Knight merger with Tech Fusion, a company whose values aligned more closely with ours. None were ideal, all represented some form of loss. "You should get some rest," Diane said, finding me alone in the conference room long after the others had gone home. "Tomorrow's going to be intense no matter what happens." I nodded, not looking, up from the financial projections on my laptop. "I'll head out soon." She didn't leave, instead settling into the chair beside me. "You know, when I first invested in Horizon, it wasn't just because of your algorithm." This caught my attention. "No?" "No," she confirmed. "It was because of how you talked about failure. Most founders I meet are terrified of it, trying to project perfect confidence. You spoke about failure as a natural part of innovation, something to learn from rather than fear." I smiled faintly. "Hard to fear something you've been called your whole life." "Exactly," she said. "That perspective was your edge. It still is." Her words stayed with me as I finally headed home, the city quiet in the late-night hours. San Francisco had a particular beauty at this time, the fog rolling in, the lights glimmering through it, everything softened and mysterious. I decided to walk rather than call a car, needing the physical movement to process the thoughts swirling through my mind. What if this wasn't the crisis it appeared to be? What if, like every other failure in my life, it was actually an opportunity to redefine success on my own terms? By the time I reached my house, a radical idea had begun to form, one so contrary to conventional business wisdom that I hesitated to share it even with Diane. But the more I considered it, the more right it felt. Not as a desperate last resort, but as a deliberate choice aligned with my deepest values. I slept more soundly than I had in days, waking with clarity and purpose. The path forward wasn't about choosing between bad options, it was about creating a new option entirely. Monday. Morning, I arrived at the office early, summoning my executive team and Diane for an emergency meeting before the regular workday began. "I've made a decision," I announced as they gathered, curious and concerned. "But I need your input before I move forward." For the next hour, I outlined my proposal, unconventional, risky, potentially transformative. There were questions, challenges, moments of concern, but by the end, a cautious optimism had spread through the room. "It's unorthodox," our CFO admitted, "but it could work." "More than that," Diane added, "it's true to who we are as a company, to who you are, Morgan." With their conditional support secured, I made 3 calls in rapid succession, to my father, to Ethan, and to Noah. Same message to each: a meeting, my office, noon, non-negotiable. As the appointed hour approached, I felt a surprising calm. Whatever happened next, the decision was mine. Not a reaction to my family's choices, but an affirmative step toward the future I wanted to create. They arrived separately, but within minutes of each other. My father first, then Ethan, finally Noah. Each registered surprise at finding the others present. I directed them to the conference room where Diane and our legal counsel waited. No pleasantries offered or expected. "Thank you for coming," I began once they were seated. "I know Innotech's board votes tomorrow on their takeover offer. I assume they've been in regular contact, making their case for why you should sell your shares." Noah nodded slightly. Ethan's expression remained carefully neutral. My father watched me with a mixture of concern and curiosity. I'm not going to counter their offer, I continued, drawing surprised looks. I'm not going to plead with you, based on family ties, or try to outbid them financially. Then why are we here? Ethan asked directly. Because I'm offering something different entirely. I nodded to our counsel, who distributed folders to each of them. I'm proposing a voluntary employee ownership program for Horizon Analytics. Under this structure, 30% of the company would be owned by its employees through a trust, with shares allocated based on tenure and contribution. They flipped through the documents with varying degrees of comprehension and surprise. You want to give away nearly a third of your company? Noah sounded incredulous. Not give away, I corrected. Restructure. The people who build Horizon every day would become its owners alongside existing shareholders. But this would dilute everyone's holdings, Ethan pointed out, always quick with financial implications. Yes, I confirmed, including mine. I'd retain 20% rather than my current 35%. But the company would be protected against future hostile takeovers because the employee trust would vote as a bloc, prioritizing Horizon's independence and mission. And our shares? Noah asked, cutting to his primary concern. Would convert to the new structure at a premium of 15% over current valuation, I explained. Higher than market value, lower than Innotech's offer. Why would we accept less than Innotech is offering? Ethan challenged. Because this isn't just about money, I said, meeting his gaze directly. It's about legacy, about being part of building something meaningful rather than dismantling it for profit. I turned to include Noah and my father. You invested in Horizon, however secretly, because you saw its potential. This structure would preserve that potential while protecting the company's core mission and giving you a continuing role in its success if you choose to remain shareholders. The silence that followed was charged with calculation, consideration, and perhaps a hint of respect. My father was the first to speak. It's bold, he said simply. Creative, like something your grandfather might have done. The comparison wasn't lost on any of us. Harold Hayes, the innovative founder whose success had shaped our family dynamics across generations. Would you remain CEO? Noah asked, his expression unreadable. Yes, I confirmed. But with a more robust governance structure, including an expanded board with employee representation. And if we decline? Ethan asked. If we sell to Innotech anyway? I had anticipated this question. Then the employee ownership plan still proceeds, but with different math. We'd raise capital from aligned investors to dilute Innotech's influence, maintaining independence, but with a more complex cap table. In other words, I was prepared to move forward regardless of their decision, not out of defiance, but from conviction that this path best served Horizon's mission and people. We'll need time to consider, Noah said, lawyer careful as always. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow, I replied. Innotech's board votes at 11. I've already briefed our other major shareholders, who have expressed conditional support contingent on the final structure. My father studied me with new eyes. Not the dismissive parent of my childhood, or even the cautiously supportive father of recent months, but as one business leader regarding another with professional respect. This isn't what I expected, he admitted. When you called the meeting, I thought you'd make an emotional appeal or try to outbid Innotech. That would have been the old Morgan, I said. The one still seeking your approval, still playing by traditional rules. But I've learned that true success isn't about winning on someone else's terms. It's about redefining the game entirely. I stood, signaling the meeting's end. I'm not asking you to choose me over Innotech because we're family. I'm asking you to recognize that Horizon's employee ownership model represents a more innovative, sustainable approach to business. one that values people alongside profit. As they gathered their materials, processing the proposal I'd presented, I added one final thought. Whatever you decide, know that this is happening. Horizon will remain independent, committed to its mission. The only question is whether you want to be part of that future. The hours after they left were consumed with preparation, finalizing documents, briefing key stakeholders, preparing communications for every possible outcome. Through it all, I maintained the strange calm that had settled over me since my late-night walk. Whatever happened next, the decision was mine. The path was clear. That evening, as I was reviewing the employee ownership trust documents one final time, my office phone rang. The caller ID showed Hayes Richard, my father. "Dad," I answered, bracing myself for his decision. "I'm not calling about the proposal," he said, surprising me. "Not directly, anyway. I wanted to tell you something else first." I waited, pen poised over the document I'd been annotating. "I've spent decades running my insurance business by conventional wisdom," he continued. "Safe choices, standard structures, predictable returns. It's been successful by traditional metrics, but never revolutionary." "Okay," I said cautiously, unsure where this was heading. "What you presented today, the employee ownership model, it's the kind of innovative thinking I've always secretly admired, but never had the courage to implement myself." His voice held a note I'd rarely heard before, something like wistful admiration. "It reminded me of your grandfather, of what might have been if I'd had the vision to build on his legacy rather than retreat to safer ground." The admission struck me deeply. My father acknowledging not just my success, but the innovative thinking he'd discouraged throughout my childhood. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "I've told your brothers I'm converting my shares to the new structure," he continued. "Not because we're family, but because I believe it's the right business decision. The right ethical decision, too." His support was unexpected but welcome. "And their reaction?" "They're still deliberating," he said. "But Morgan, I want you to know I'm proud of you, not just for building a successful company, but for having the courage to lead it according to your values, even when that's the harder path." After we hung up, I sat motionless, processing this shift in our relationship. My father's approval, once the thing I'd craved above all else, now felt like a pleasant affirmation rather than a necessary validation. Somewhere along the way, I'd truly become my own measure of success. Morning brought the moment of decision. By 8:30, my executive team and I were assembled in the conference room, coffee growing cold as we watched the clock. "Whatever happens," I told them, "we proceed with the employee ownership plan. The only variable is which shareholders participate and at what levels." At 8:55, my assistant appeared at the door. "Morgan, your brothers are here." I nodded, standing to greet them as they entered. Their expressions gave nothing away. Noah's clinical detachment, Ethan's business poker face. "We've made our decision," Noah began without preamble. "Independently, though we happened to reach the same conclusion." My pulse quickened despite my outward calm. "And?" "We're converting our shares to the new structure," Ethan said. "The employee ownership model is compelling, financially and conceptually." Relief flooded through me, though I maintained my professional demeanor. "I appreciate your consideration. This decision strengthens Horizon's future significantly." "To be clear," Noah added, "this isn't a sentimental choice. It's a recognition that your leadership has built substantial value, and the model you've proposed could build even more." "Understood," I said, recognizing this was as close to an endorsement as Noah was likely to give. I've never wanted sentiment to drive business decisions, only for business decisions to align with broader values. With their agreement secured, the day unfolded in a flurry of activity. Legal documents were finalized, board approvals obtained, communications prepared for employees and the press. By mid-afternoon, when Innotech's board would be voting on their takeover bid, we were already moving forward with our alternative future. The employee ownership announcement was met with surprise, excitement, and some confusion from the Horizon team. I called an all-hands meeting to explain the vision personally, how every employee would now have a direct stake in our success, how this structure protected our independence and mission, how it aligned with our fundamental belief that people were our most valuable asset. This doesn't mean we won't face challenges, I concluded as hundreds of faces, both in person and on video screens, watched attentively. But it means we'll face them together, as owners rather than just employees. Your ideas, your innovations, your commitment, these have always built Horizon. Now that reality is reflected in our ownership structure as well. The questions that followed were thoughtful, engaged, forward-looking. Not, why is this happening? But, how can we make it work? Not fear of change, but excitement about possibility. As the meeting concluded and people returned to their work with a new energy, Diane appeared at my side. "Congratulations," she said simply. "You just redefined success again." Later that evening, as the press releases went live and business, news outlets began reporting on Horizon's innovative restructuring. I sat in my office, watching the city lights emerge as dusk settled over San Francisco. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Your grandfather would be proud. I certainly am." For once, the message stirred no complicated emotions, no hunger for validation, no resentment for approval that came too late. It was simply one business leader acknowledging another's bold move, a relationship of mutual respect rather than hierarchical judgment. I had made my true decision, not just about Horizon's ownership structure, but about how I would define success, family, and my own worth going forward. Not by rejecting my past or my family entirely, but by transforming our relationship into something healthier, more honest, more mutual. The company nickname that had once been a source of shame, the Failure, now struck me as ironically appropriate. Failure had been my greatest teacher, my unique advantage. The willingness to risk it, learn from it, and transform it into something new had led me here, to a $12 million company structured unlike any other in our industry, pioneering a model that might influence businesses far beyond our scope. As I finally headed home that night, exhausted but deeply satisfied, I realized that the true decision hadn't been about business structure or family dynamics in isolation. It had been about integration, bringing my whole self, past and present, strengths and wounds, into alignment with my deepest values. I had stopped choosing between being successful and being true to myself. I had found a way to be both. In the months following Horizon's restructuring, the business press couldn't get enough of our story. Revolutionary corporate structure. The future of tech ownership. How Morgan Hayes redefined business success. The headlines kept coming as our employee ownership model sparked conversations across the industry. I found myself speaking at conferences I'd once dreamed of merely attending, explaining our approach to audiences of business leaders, investors, and aspiring entrepreneurs. The questions were always similar. Wasn't I worried about diluting my control? Didn't I fear employees would make decisions based on short-term interests? Wasn't this just idealism masquerading as business strategy? This isn't about idealism, I would explain. It's about recognizing reality. The people who build our company every day are its greatest asset. Their insights, their innovations, their commitment, these drive our success. The ownership structure simply aligns incentives with that reality. What I didn't say publicly, but knew deeply, was how this approach had healed something fundamental in me. After decades of feeling unseen and undervalued, I was creating a company culture where everyone's contributions were recognized, where failure was reframed as necessary iteration, where success was defined communally rather than hierarchically. Our financial results soon silenced the skeptics. 6 months after the restructuring, Horizon's valuation had climbed to $20 million. Employee retention reached an industry-leading 94%, and our innovation pipeline strengthened as staff began proposing ideas they might once have kept to themselves, now incentivized by their ownership stake. The Pathfinders Foundation flourished, as well, expanding to 3 additional cities and launching a venture fund specifically for women-led startups focused on social impact. With the inheritance from my grandfather powering its growth and Horizon's continued support providing stability, the foundation was transforming the landscape for women in tech far beyond what I'd initially imagined. My relationship with my family continued to evolve in unexpected ways. My father became something of an advocate for our ownership model, sharing the Horizon case study with his business associates and gradually incorporating elements of it into his own company's succession planning. "I'm too old to completely restructure," he admitted during one of our monthly dinners. "But I've created a profit-sharing trust for our long-term employees. It's a start." Noah, ever the calculated one, maintained a professional distance but engaged meaningfully with Horizon's healthcare initiatives, providing valuable input that strengthened our offerings in that sector. His involvement was strictly business, no family dinners, no personal reconnection. But the mutual respect developing between us felt more authentic than the forced closeness of our childhood. Ethan surprised me most. After converting his shares to the new structure, he'd approached me about the advisory role I'd offered during the crisis. "I didn't think you were serious," he said, uncharacteristically humble. "After everything, I assumed it was just negotiation tactics." "I meant it," I assured him. "Your corporate experience is different from mine. That perspective has value." He joined our advisory board and proved surprisingly insightful, particularly around scaling challenges and organizational structure. Our relationship remained professional, but gradually thawed, occasional moments of genuine connection breaking through the years of accumulated tension. My mother remained the most resistant to change, clinging to traditional family narratives even as they increasingly failed to match reality. She sent cards on birthdays and holidays, made occasional awkward phone calls, and continued to frame my success as something that had happened despite my impractical approach rather than because of it. "I still don't understand why you had to be so dramatic about everything," she complained during a rare lunch together. "All that blog writing, that foundation named so pointedly. We always wanted what was best for you." "I know you believe that," I replied, no longer feeling the need to convince her. "But what matters now is that I'm building something meaningful, something true to who I am." She had sighed, changing the subject to safer territory: the weather, her garden club, neighborhood gossip. I let her, understanding now that some relationships could only change so much, that acceptance sometimes meant acknowledging limitations rather than fighting against them. Through it all, Grandma Joan remained my most steadfast family ally, joining me for weekly brunches and offering the perspective that came with her 80-plus years of watching family dynamics unfold. "You've broken the cycle," she told me one Sunday, her eyes bright with pride. "Not just professionally, but personally. You've created success without sacrificing authenticity." A year after the restructuring, as Horizon prepared to move into expanded headquarters in downtown San Francisco, I found myself standing in the empty space that would soon become our new home. 30,000 square feet of potential spread across 3 floors, with space for both current operations and future growth. "What do you think?" asked Raj, now our chief operating officer, as we surveyed the bare concrete and exposed beams. "Designers want your input on the layout." I moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows, taking in the panoramic view of the city that had first welcomed me when no one else would. "I want it to reflect who we are as a company, collaborative but with space for focused work, transparent but with necessary privacy, beautiful but functional." So, Exactly like our founder, he observed with a smile. As we walked through the space, I shared my vision for what this building phase of Horizon would entail. Not just the physical headquarters, but the evolving company culture, the expanding mission, the deepening impact. First floor should be community space, I decided. Areas where Pathfinder's mentees can work alongside established teams, where we host events that build connections beyond our walls. Open to the public? Raj asked, making notes. Semi-open, I clarified. Accessible but curated. We want to be part of the community, not isolated from it. The headquarters design became a physical manifestation of the philosophy I'd been building. Boundaries without barriers, structure with flexibility, individual excellence within collective purpose. During construction, I received an unexpected call from Clara, Noah's wife. Though we'd never been close, she'd always been the most perceptive member of that branch of the family, showing genuine interest in my work when others dismissed it. I'm calling about Lily, she said, referring to their 15-year-old daughter. She's interested in coding but facing some resistance from Noah. I frowned, memories of my own adolescent struggles surfacing. What kind of resistance? He thinks it's an impractical focus for her, that she should prioritize pre-med courses to prepare for medical school. The frustration in Clara's voice was evident. He doesn't see her the way I do. She lights up when she's solving technical problems, the way you always did. And you're calling me because, I prompted, though I already knew. Because you broke the pattern, she said simply. Because you might be able to help Lily do the same without facing the barriers you did. The request touched something deep in me. The opportunity to prevent another young woman from experiencing the pain of being unseen, underestimated, inappropriately labeled. Bring her to Pathfinders, I suggested. We have a high school program, starting next month. No pressure, just exposure to what's possible. Clara's relief was palpable. Thank you. And Morgan? I've always admired how you stood your ground, even when I didn't say so. 2 weeks later, I watched from across the room as Lily joined a group of teenage girls learning about algorithm design. Her initial shyness gave way to animated conversation as they tackled a challenging problem together, her dark eyes, so like Noah's, sparkling with the joy of intellectual engagement. She reminds me of you, said a voice beside me, and I turned to find Noah himself standing there, his expression unreadable. You came, I observed, surprised. Clara had brought Lily to the program, but Noah had been conspicuously absent from the orientation. I've been reconsidering some things, he admitted, watching his daughter gesture enthusiastically as she explained a concept to her group. How certain I've been about what success should look like. How limiting that can be. It was perhaps the closest he'd ever come to acknowledging the pattern that had shaped our childhood, the rigid definitions, the prescribed paths, the dismissal of alternatives. She's brilliant in her own way, I said carefully. Different. From you, different from me. That's something to nurture, not redirect. He nodded slowly. I'm beginning to see that. As we stood there, two successful adults with our complicated shared history, watching the next generation find their path with more support than we'd had, I felt a sense of purpose that transcended the personal and professional divisions I'd once maintained so rigidly. The building phase wasn't just about Horizon's growth or my individual success. It was about creating structures, physical, organizational, relational, that would outlast me, that would make space for others to thrive without facing the barriers I had encountered. This understanding deepened as the new headquarters took shape, as Horizon launched ambitious new initiatives, as Pathfinders expanded its reach. I was building something larger than myself, something that incorporated the lessons of my past without being limited by them. On the evening before our new headquarters' official opening, I invited a small group for a private tour. Diane, my core executive team, Grandma Joan, and, somewhat to my surprise, my father. "This is extraordinary," he said as we stood in the main atrium, his eyes taking in the soaring space with its collaborative areas, its glass-walled conference rooms, its striking central staircase designed to encourage spontaneous encounters between teams. "It's meant to reflect our values," I explained. "Transparency, connection, innovation within structure." He nodded thoughtfully. "Your grandfather would have loved this. He always said physical spaces should embody organizational philosophy." "I believe that too," I agreed. "Everything we build, whether it's a company, a foundation, or a headquarters, should align with our deeper purpose." Later, as the small group enjoyed dinner on the rooftop terrace overlooking the city lights, Diane raised a toast. "To Morgan," she said, glass held high, "who turned what others called failure into the foundation for revolutionary success." The word struck me as not quite complete. "And to all the people who helped build this," I added. "The team who believed in the vision, the mentees who continue to inspire it, the family members who, eventually, made space for a different definition of success." My father's eyes met mine across the table, acknowledgement passing between us. We would never have the simple relationship of mutual understanding I might have wished for as a child. Too much history, too many ingrained patterns stood between us. But we had found something perhaps more valuable, a respectful recognition of our differences, an appreciation of our unique strengths, a shared commitment to breaking destructive cycles. As the evening wound down and the group dispersed, I remained on the terrace alone, contemplating the city that had welcomed me when I arrived with nothing but determination and unrealized potential. So much had changed since then, my circumstances certainly, but more importantly, my relationship with myself. I no longer defined my worth by others' recognition. I no longer feared failure as something that defined me rather than informed me. I had built a life and a company aligned with my authentic self, incorporating even the painful parts of my journey into something meaningful and generative. The building phase wasn't complete. It never would be, really. There would always be new challenges, new opportunities for growth, new ways to expand the vision. But the foundation was solid now, constructed not despite my past, but because of it, strengthened by every experience of being underestimated, every instance of being called the failure, every moment of choosing my own path despite disapproval. As I turned to leave, taking one last look at the illuminated headquarters that would welcome hundreds of employees tomorrow, I felt profound gratitude for the journey. All of it, even the painful parts that had once seemed insurmountable. They had led me here, to this moment of creating something both personally fulfilling and collectively meaningful. I had built more than a successful company. I had built a life on my own terms. 3 years after the employee ownership restructuring, Horizon Analytics had transformed from promising startup to industry leader. Our valuation had reached $35 million, our team had grown to over 200 people across 5 offices, and our predictive analytics technology was being implemented by companies around the world. The Pathfinders Foundation had evolved as well, now operating in 12 cities with a dedicated endowment ensuring its sustainability. Over 500 young women had completed the program, many launching their own ventures or securing leadership positions in established tech companies. The cycle of exclusion I'd experienced was being broken in tangible, measurable ways. On a personal level, I'd found balance that once seemed impossible, running a successful company while making time for relationships, creative pursuits, and occasional stillness. I'd even begun dating someone seriously, a thoughtful architect, named Gabriel, who understood ambition without being defined by it, who saw my drive as complementary rather than threatening to his own. "You're different from other CEOs I've known," he'd observed early in our relationship. "Less attached to power for its own sake, more focused on impact." I had to redefine success for myself, I'd explained. Power was never the goal. Creating something meaningful was. As Horizon approached its 7th anniversary, I decided it was time to write a book, not the memoir publishers had been pushing for, but a business philosophy book that would share the principles we'd developed, the lessons we'd learned, the structures we'd created that might benefit others. I called it Failing Forward: How Redefining Success Builds Stronger Companies, deliberately reclaiming the label that had once been used to diminish me. The manuscript combined business strategy, organizational psychology, and personal narrative, offering a framework for leaders seeking to align corporate structure with human values. My editor, impressed with the initial draft, suggested a marketing tour to coincide with the release: speaking engagements, media appearances, book signings across major cities. The timing aligned with Horizon's anniversary celebration, creating a natural opportunity to reflect on the journey and its broader implications. As preparations for both the book launch and anniversary events progressed, I received an unexpected email from Ethan. Our relationship had warmed over the years of his advisory board service, but we still maintained certain boundaries, our interactions, primarily professional with occasional glimpses of the siblings we might have been under different circumstances. "I've been thinking about the anniversary," he wrote, "about how different things might have been if Innotech had succeeded with their takeover. I want you to know I'm grateful they didn't, not just because the employee ownership structure has been financially advantageous, but because what you've built deserves to exist on its own terms. It's something special, Morgan, something I'm proud to be associated with, however peripherally." The acknowledgement meant more than I would have expected. Ethan, who had coined my childhood nickname, now expressing genuine appreciation for what I'd created. It represented a full circle I hadn't realized I was still seeking. My relationship with Noah had evolved differently. While never becoming close personally, we had developed a mutually beneficial professional connection. His daughter Lily, now 18 and preparing for college, had thrived in the Pathfinders program, developing her coding skills alongside her academic pursuits. To Noah's credit, he had set aside his initial resistance, supporting her application to top computer science programs alongside pre-med options. "She has opportunities I never considered for her," he admitted during a rare one-on-one conversation at a Pathfinders graduation event. "Because you created space for possibilities. Outside the paths I understood." My mother remained the most unchanged, still viewing my success through her limited lens, still attempting to fit it into conventional narratives she could understand. She'd attended my father's birthday celebration at the Horizon headquarters the previous year, wandering the innovative space with bemused incomprehension. "It's very modern," she'd said, clearly struggling to find appropriate praise. "Your father says you're doing extremely well financially." "We are," I'd confirmed, no longer needing her to understand the deeper purpose behind the prosperity. "I always knew you'd find your way eventually," she'd continued, rewriting history as she often did. "You just took a different path than we expected." I'd merely nodded, accepting that her version of our story would always differ from mine. That complete reconciliation might never be possible. The peace I'd found came not from her validation, but from my own integration of past and present, pain and purpose. As the book release approached, I received an unexpected call from a producer at a major business network. "We're planning a special feature on Horizon's anniversary and your book launch," she explained. "We'd like to include perspectives from people who've been part of your journey, professional colleagues, foundation mentees, and family members who've witnessed your evolution from struggling entrepreneur to industry innovator." Family members. The phrase caught me off guard. "I'm not sure my family would be comfortable with that," I said carefully. "Actually, we've already spoken with your father and grandmother, who both expressed interest," she replied. "Your father was particularly eloquent about how your approach challenged his traditional business mindset." The revelation surprised me. My father, speaking publicly about our complicated history, about how his perspective had changed, it represented a vulnerability I hadn't expected from him. After consulting with Diane and my PR team, I agreed to the feature with certain parameters. The focus would remain on business innovation rather than family drama, and family members would be included only if they could speak authentically. About the professional journey. The week before the interview was scheduled, my father asked to meet for coffee, outside our regular monthly dinner rotation, which immediately signaled its importance. "I want to be honest in this interview," he said without preamble. "About how I underestimated you. About how we all did. About the nickname and what it represented." I studied him across the table, this man who had once been the primary source of the judgment I'd internalized, who had gradually become something closer to a peer. "That's your choice," I said carefully. "But this isn't about public confession or absolution. It's about sharing a business journey that might help others." He nodded slowly. "I understand, but part of that journey is how conventional definitions of success can blind people to innovative potential. I was blind that way. If sharing that helps other parents or business leaders avoid the same mistake, it seems worthwhile." His willingness to acknowledge his limitations publicly, to potentially help others avoid similar patterns, touched me deeply. It represented growth I couldn't have imagined during those painful family dinners where the failure nickname had first taken root. In that context, I think it could be valuable, I agreed. The day of the interview, the network set up in Horizon's main atrium, cameras capturing the vibrant workspace, the collaborative activity, the physical manifestation of the culture we'd built. The segment included conversations with team members, Pathfinders graduates, and business partners before turning to the more personal aspects of the journey. My father spoke with surprising candor. "I was raised with a specific vision of what success looked like," he explained. "When Morgan showed interest in technology, in entrepreneurship, areas outside my comfort zone, I defaulted to discouragement rather than support. I couldn't see the potential because it didn't match my preconceptions." "And now?" the interviewer prompted. "Now I understand that innovation often comes from exactly those places we dismiss as impractical," he said. Morgan's approach, which we unfortunately labeled as failure, was actually her greatest strength. Her willingness to challenge conventions, to iterate through problems, to persevere despite skepticism, these created something remarkable. Watching from the sidelines, I felt a complex surge of emotions, validation certainly, but also a strange sense of release. His public acknowledgement didn't change the past, but it confirmed that my present wasn't built on denial or revision of history. The pain had been real, the dismissal had happened, and now the growth was real too, both mine and, somewhat unexpectedly, his. When my segment began, the interviewer asked about the book title's deliberate reclamation of the failure concept. "This nickname followed me for years," I explained, "but what I've realized is that my comfort with failure, with trying, learning, adjusting, trying again, became my competitive advantage. While others avoided risks for fear of what failure might mean about them, I'd already faced that fear. I'd already been called the worst thing they could imagine, and I'd survived." "So you transformed what was meant as criticism into a strength." "Exactly. And that's what this book explores. How organizations can build cultures where failure is treated as valuable information rather than personal deficiency. Where innovation is fostered through iteration rather than stunted by fear." As the interview continued, I found myself speaking with a clarity and purpose that transcended the personal narrative. This wasn't about my family anymore, or even just about Horizon. It was about transforming business culture more broadly, about creating spaces where more people could contribute their unique perspectives without artificial limitations. The segment ended with footage of a Pathfinders graduation, young women receiving certificates and mentorship placements, their faces alight with possibility. "This," I explained over the footage, "is the full circle moment for me. Not just building a successful company, but ensuring others have the support I initially lacked. Success isn't just about personal achievement, it's about creating systems where more people can access opportunity. In the days following the interview's broadcast, my inbox filled with messages from viewers sharing their own stories of being underestimated, of reclaiming negative labels, of building success on their own terms. Parents wrote about reconsidering how they supported their children's unconventional interests. Business leaders questioned their assumptions about what promising talent looked like. The book launched to strong sales and critical acclaim, its message resonating beyond typical business audiences to reach people rethinking success in various contexts. Speaking engagements filled my calendar, each one an opportunity to share the principles that had emerged from my journey. At the official Horizon anniversary celebration, held in our headquarters with hundreds of employees, partners, and supporters in attendance, I found myself surrounded by the extended family I'd built. Not just biological relatives, but the people who had believed in the vision, who had contributed to its realization, who had expanded its impact beyond anything I could have created alone. Grandma Joan, now in her mid-80s but still sharp as ever, squeezed my hand as we watched the celebration unfold. "Full circle," she said, echoing the phrase I'd used in the interview. From the girl they called the failure to the woman who redefined success for an entire industry. It wasn't about proving them wrong, I realized aloud. It was about proving something else entirely possible. She nodded, understanding as she always had. The best revenge isn't success by conventional measures. It's creating a new measure entirely, one that values what makes you uniquely yourself. Later that evening, as the formal ceremonies concluded and the gathering transitioned to more relaxed celebration, I found a quiet moment on the rooftop terrace. The city spread out before me, lights twinkling against the darkness, each one representing possibilities, stories, potential. My father joined me, respecting my solitude with comfortable silence before speaking. "I keep thinking about what might have been," he said finally, "if we had supported you from the beginning, if we had seen what you were capable of." "I've thought about that too," I admitted. "But I'm not sure I would have built the same things. The resistance, the need to prove the value of my ideas even to those closest to me, that shaped Horizon's culture in fundamental ways." He considered this. "Still, I wish we hadn't made it harder than it needed to be." "I know," I said simply, "but we're here now, and that matters too." As we stood there, the past and present seeming to occupy the same space, I realized that the full circle wasn't about returning to where I'd started. It wasn't about my family finally seeing me the way I'd always wanted to be seen. It was about seeing myself clearly, strengths and vulnerabilities, achievements and ongoing challenges, and creating spaces where others could be similarly seen. It was about transforming old pain into new purpose, about building bridges where walls had once stood. The journey from the failure to founder of a $35 million company hadn't erased the past. It had incorporated it, transmuted it into something useful, meaningful, even beautiful in its complexity. The circle was complete not because everything was resolved, not because all relationships were perfectly healed, but because I had integrated all parts of my story, the rejection and the triumph, the hurt and the healing, the struggle and the success, into a whole that was authentically, uniquely mine. 5 years after Horizon's restructuring, on my 35th birthday, I stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the San Francisco Palace Hotel, preparing to deliver the keynote address at the Women in Technology Global Summit. The audience of 2,000 represented a cross-section of the industry: established leaders, emerging innovators, aspiring students, all gathered to discuss the future of technology and the people who would shape it. As I looked out at the sea of faces, I couldn't help reflecting on how far I'd come from that small-town Idaho girl with business journals hidden under her bed, dreams dismissed at every family dinner. Horizon Analytics had recently been valued at $50 million, with offices in 6 countries and a team of nearly 300. The employee ownership model we'd pioneered had been adopted by dozens of other companies, creating a movement within the industry toward more equitable structures. But the achievement that filled me with the deepest pride sat in the front row. 50 young women from the Pathfinders Foundation, their faces alight with possibility, their futures unconstrained by the limitations others might try to impose. They represented the real legacy I hoped to build, far more meaningful than any valuation or industry award. 10 years ago, I began, my voice steady and clear. I sat in a converted storage room that served as my first office, staring at a bank account with less than $1,000, wondering if everyone who called me a failure might be right. A knowing chuckle rippled through the audience, not because failure was funny, but because so many had faced similar moments of doubt. Today, I'm not here to talk about how I proved them wrong. I'm here to talk about how I proved something else entirely possible, a different definition of success, a different approach to business, a different way of measuring value. For the next 40 minutes, I shared the principles that had guided Horizon's growth, the importance of aligned incentives, the value of diverse perspectives, the necessity of creating spaces where innovation could flourish without fear of failure. I spoke about the employee ownership model not just as a financial structure, but as a philosophical stance on what business could and should be. The greatest barrier to innovation isn't lack of ideas, I explained. It's cultures where the cost of failure feels too high, where being wrong once might label you permanently, where conformity seems safer than creativity, where potential is measured by conventional metrics rather than unique contribution. As I concluded, I invited the Pathfinders mentees to stand, young women from diverse backgrounds, each with her own story of obstacles overcome and talents discovered. "This is what success looks like to me," I said, gesturing toward them. "Not just building one company that thrives, but creating pathways for hundreds of others to build their own visions. Not just achieving personal wealth, but distributing opportunity more equitably. Not just proving critics wrong, but transforming criticism into constructive purpose." The standing ovation that followed was gratifying, but what moved me most were the conversations afterward. Women of all ages sharing their stories of being underestimated, of finding their voices, of building success on their own terms despite doubt from those who should have believed in them first. Among those waiting to speak with me after the keynote was Lily, Noah's daughter, now a confident 20-year-old pursuing a double major in computer science and bioengineering at Stanford. She had become a regular presence in my life, our relationship, evolving from formal mentorship to something more familial, more essential. "That was incredible," she said, hugging me tightly. "You almost made me cry like 3 different times." I laughed, returning her embrace. "Just sharing what I've learned the hard way. Hopefully some of you can take a more direct route." "About that," she said, suddenly serious. "I've been working on something I want to show you. A healthcare analytics platform that combines Dad's medical expertise with the coding skills I developed through Pathfinders." She pulled out her tablet, showing me a prototype that immediately impressed me with its elegant functionality and clear purpose. It's designed to predict patient outcomes based on multiple variables, helping doctors target interventions more effectively. "This is remarkable, Lily," I said, genuinely impressed. "Have you shown your father?" She nodded, a complicated smile crossing her features. "That's the other thing I wanted to tell you. We're working on it together. He's providing the medical framework. I'm building the technical architecture." "You and Noah? Collaborating?" The development surprised me, given my brother's initial resistance to her technological interests. "It's been educational for both of us," she admitted. "He's learning to see my coding as legitimate expertise, not just a hobby. I'm learning that his medical knowledge has depth I hadn't appreciated." The image of Noah and Lily working together, bridging the generational divide that had separated me from my family, felt like a redemptive thread in our complicated family tapestry. Not erasure of past mistakes, but evidence that patterns could indeed be broken, that new relationships could be built on healthier foundations. Later that evening, Gabriel hosted a small birthday gathering at our home, a renovated Victorian in Russian Hill with sweeping views of the bay. The guest list reflected the family I'd built over the years. Diane, now semi-retired but still my most trusted advisor. Raj and key members of the Horizon leadership team. Grandma Joan, elegant at 87. A handful of close friends who had supported me through the journey's ups and downs. My father attended, bringing a vintage bottle of champagne and a letter. He handed to me privately, asking me to read it later. Ethan came with his wife and children, our relationship now characterized by a genuine, if limited, warmth. Noah and Clara arrived with Lily, the 3 generations of Hayes family representing a complex evolution rather than a simple resolution. My mother had declined the invitation with a polite note about previous commitments, a response I'd expected, and accepted without the old sting of rejection. Some relationships had transformed profoundly. Others had shifted only slightly. I had made peace with this uneven healing, no longer needing universal validation to feel whole. As dinner concluded, and conversations flowed around the table, I found myself observing the scene with a sense of quiet wonder. Here were people who had seen me clearly from the beginning, like Diane and Raj, alongside those who had only gradually recognized me, like my father and Ethan. Here were newer connections, like Gabriel, who knew me only as the confident CEO, the woman comfortable in her power, yet who understood and honored the journey that had shaped me. Speech, Diane called out as dessert was served, raising her glass. Birthday wisdom from our visionary. I stood, champagne in hand, surveying the faces turned toward me, expectant, supportive, genuinely interested in what I might say. 10 years ago, I began, echoing my keynote opener. I fled to San Francisco with 2 suitcases and a complex relationship with the word failure. I was running from a nickname, from a family narrative that couldn't contain who I really was or what I might become. I paused, meeting my father's eyes briefly, seeing his slight nod of acknowledgement. What I didn't understand then was that I wasn't just running from something. I was running toward a different possibility, toward a vision of success defined not by external validation, but by authentic purpose. Toward relationships based on mutual recognition rather than hierarchical judgment, toward work that would create value beyond financial metrics. I raised my glass higher. I'm grateful for each of you who has been part of this journey, those who believed from the beginning, those who joined along the way, even those whose challenges pushed me to clarify my own convictions. You've all contributed to the life and work I've built, and I'm richer for having you in it. The toast that followed felt like a communion of sorts, an acknowledgement of our interconnection, of how we shape each other through both support and resistance, through recognition and its absence. Later, as guests began to depart, I found a quiet moment to read my father's letter. Written in his precise handwriting, it was brief, but spoke volumes. Morgan, on this milestone birthday, I want to acknowledge not just who you've become, but who you always were, even when I couldn't see it clearly. The qualities I once misread as impracticality were actually vision beyond conventional frameworks. What I dismissed as stubborn defiance was the necessary persistence that would build something remarkable. I'm working on a memoir about my business journey, including the blind spots that nearly cost me a relationship with my most innovative child. If you're willing, I'd like your input as it develops. Not to rewrite our history, but to ensure others might learn from it. With pride and respect, Dad. The letter brought unexpected tears. Not from reopened wounds, but from recognition of how far we had both traveled. From the failure to valued contributor, From disappointed father to humble learner, we had found our way to a relationship neither of us could have imagined during those painful early years. After the last guest departed, Gabriel and I sat on our rooftop deck, watching fog roll in over the Golden Gate Bridge, blurring the boundary between water and sky. "Happy birthday," he said, his arm warm around my shoulders. "How does 35 feel?" I considered the question seriously. Like integration, like all the pieces of who I've been, the overlooked daughter, the struggling entrepreneur, the successful CEO, the reluctant role model, have finally coalesced into something whole. He nodded, understanding as he always did. "You've done something remarkable, you know. Not just built a successful company, but transformed painful experience into constructive purpose." It wasn't a straight line, I acknowledged. There were moments I wanted nothing more than to prove them all wrong, to throw my success in their faces. "But that's not the legacy you chose to build," he observed. "No," I agreed. "Revenge success is still defined by others' parameters. I wanted to create something that would exist on its own terms, regardless of who could see its value." As we sat there, contemplating the city that had become my home, I thought about the word legacy, what it meant and what I hoped mine would be. Not just Horizon Analytics, though the company represented a significant achievement. Not just the Pathfinder's Foundation, though its impact would ripple through generations. Not even the employee ownership model that was gradually transforming industry standards. My true legacy, I realized, was more intangible, but perhaps more enduring. The demonstration that conventional definitions of success could be questioned. That failure could be reframed as necessary iteration. That value could be measured by more than profit margins. It was the young women like Lily who were pursuing their talents without apology. It was former Pathfinder's mentees now launching their own ventures with confidence I'd never had at their age. It was companies adopting more equitable structures because we'd proven them viable and valuable. It was even, perhaps, my own family gradually breaking cycles of limitation that had persisted for generations. My father writing his memoir to help others avoid his mistakes. Ethan acknowledging innovation beyond his initial understanding. Noah collaborating with his daughter on a project that honored both their strengths. The nickname that had once defined me, the failure, now seemed almost quaint in its short-sightedness, like a primitive map unable to capture the true dimensions of the territory it attempted to describe. I had not only transcended it, but transformed it, extracting wisdom from wound, purpose from pain. As Gabriel and I finally headed inside, the fog now completely enveloping the bridge, I felt a profound sense of contentment. Not because everything was perfect or all relationships completely healed, but because I had built a life that honored my authentic self, that channeled my unique strengths toward meaningful contribution. 10 years ago, when my family had looked at me and seen only what I wasn't, I had fled to San Francisco determined to prove them wrong. Now, having built a $50 million company that reflected my deepest values, I understood that success wasn't about proving critics wrong. It was about proving something else entirely possible. The girl they'd called the failure had redefined the very meaning of success, creating legacy that would outlast any company valuation or family judgment. By reframing what others had meant as limitation into unique advantage, by turning obstacles into opportunities, by transforming exclusion into more inclusive models, I had written a different story than anyone could have predicted. Not despite being called the failure, but in some profound way, because of it. The journey had come full circle, not to where I had begun, but to a place I could never have reached without every step of the path. Even the painful ones, even the detours and obstacles that had seemed insurmountable at the time. This was the wisdom I now carried forward and shared with others facing their own doubters, their own limiting labels, their own seemingly impossible dreams. True success isn't proving critics wrong. It's creating something so aligned with your authentic self that others' opinions become irrelevant to its value. In the end, my $12 million company had grown to $50 million not because I sought revenge against those who dismissed me, but because I built something true to my vision, something that created value beyond financial metrics. A company, a foundation, a community, a movement that embodied the future I wanted to create rather than the limitations others had tried to impose. And that, I realized, was the most powerful response possible to anyone who had ever called me the failure. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.